What's going on, everybody? My name's James and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be exploring the Blue Palace here. I have been working on the Blue Palace for 3 weeks over the lockdown in the United Kingdom, and I've been making this my little project to occupy me. In that process, I've created this magnificent, beautiful royal palace which I think you guys are going to really love, and we're going to tour a little bit of it today. We're going to be touring the Queen's Grand Apartments, so that'll be in the left side of the palace. So we're going to be exploring the Queen's Grand Apartments today. What we're looking at here is the central courtyard, the sort of royal courtyard in the centre of the palace, but we need to go to the Queen's entrance to the palace, which is on the other side. So let's head there now. Just a quick look briefly here, guys. This is the royal gate to the palace, the entrance to the main part of the building, but we're going to be going to the Queen's side of the palace here. So this here, guys, is the official entrance into the central courtyard of the palace. So this is where you would come in if you were entering the royal courtyard, but we're going to head over to the Queen's gate. But I just wanted to show you guys this set of gates because they are beautiful. And we're going to head over to the Queen's gates now, which is just over here. So what we're looking at now is a much smaller courtyard, which is the Queen's entrance to the palace. It's also the entrance which you would come in by if you were wanting to see the Queen. Now I'm going to be explaining these, these parts of the palace in terms of if they were real, so it gives you a better idea of how they function, etc. So this is the Queen's courtyard, the entrance into her private sort of domain of the palace, which is the left half of the central south wing. We can see a couple of the pavilions here which I built, which are rather beautiful, flanking the wings there. So let's head on in. You can see there's a statue just there. Take a brief look at it as we process further in. So yes, this is the Queen's courtyard, and what I built here is a rather equestrian statue of the Queen on horseback. If we just take a look here, I've tried to sort of make it look like a figure on horseback. It's supposed to be the Queen on horseback, but you can't tell who it is. But it's just a little equestrian statue to flank the courtyard here, to stop it from being a completely flat, boring courtyard. I added in this lovely equestrian statue, and it's called Queen Mathilde Anne. So it's some sort of swan of the queens on horseback there. So let's head in. So this facade we're looking at here is inspired by the Villa Madama in Italy. I believe it's in Venice, this facade here. So let's just head on in. So located in here is the Queen's staircase. Let's have a look. Note also, guys, that this is a public entrance to the palace. So this is the public way in. Okay. We've got some signs here. It says, "Welcome, visitor. Welcome to the Blue Palace. Here you are in the Queen's domain of the palace. Upstairs on the principal level are the Queen's Grand Apartments. Why not go and explore? This staircase is inspired by the Caserta Palace, the Caserta Royal Palace, okay? And this staircase is called the Caserta Staircase. Wonder why it's called that? Because the staircase is inspired by the Palace of Caserta's Royal Staircase. So, let's take a nice slow procession up the staircase here. This staircase took me 2 or 3 days to build because it's just so enormous and magnificent. I went into every detail to make it exactly like a replica of the staircase at the Palace of Caserta in Italy. Look at the ceiling here. Look at that dome. You can actually go up there and stand on in the dome level there, and the beautiful Gothic sort of ceiling, like a vaulted ceiling there. And then we have this amazing scale of the staircase. You could see there's columns and arches, and it's just so beautiful. And the scale of it really just takes, it's just a wonderful space. It's one of my favourite interiors I've built so far. It's just so magnificent. And this is what's known as the Queen's Staircase. So this staircase is the processional ceremonial route into the Queen's apartments. And then here we have the upper vestibule, which is like a waiting area. We have this circular middle section here, which is flanked by columns. And then we can take a look at back on the staircase. You can see a little window there at the top. It's just a fantastic, grand space, and it just really represents the sort of grandeur that you can bring to Minecraft with just a bit of creativity. And this is just something, I just think it's so exquisite. Let's head on through. Before we go in, guys, what's known as the Queen's Grand Apartments means they are a set of ceremonial rooms. They're purely for display purposes. But yeah, they're like a big alignment of grand rooms. And what happens is they start off as bigger rooms, and then towards the end of the apartment, the rooms get smaller. So let's head on through. So this here, guys, is what's known as the Queen's Ballroom, and it's the very first room in the grand apartments, and it's built in the Russian style. If you guys have ever been to places like the Catherine Palace or the Winter Palace or any sort of Russian imperial palace, you'll know that there's a certain style acquired to these Russian royal palaces, and this here I've tried to capture in the Russian style. This room in particular is inspired by the ballroom at the Catherine Palace, and we can see there the Queen's Ballroom. So it's a really lovely space. You know, every room I've tried to capture with exquisite detail, and I think this room is no exception, really. It's very magnificent and beautiful. I love all the gold. The more gold, the better for me. You'll notice in these rooms, guys, that my theme is over the top grandeur, over the top monumental scale grandeur. You know, everything's just so over the top. That's really my style. So this is the Queen's Ballroom. We'll head on through. The next room is what's known as the Queen's Banqueting Room. And you'll notice with these next few 2 or 3 rooms, they are built in the chinoiserie style. Chinoiserie is an early 19th century sort of Chinese Oriental theme interior decoration. So we see here this room, you'll see it looks a bit oriental, doesn't it? So we'll walk on in. This space is gigantic, and you see these unusual chandeliers. You see these unusual chandeliers, and just the scale of the space. You can see on the windows there's massive drapery hangings over the windows, and you see there's an enormous table here laid out. And then this great big huge dome which has a leaf pattern display built onto it. And this gigantic central chandelier held up by like some sort of weird mystical shape there holding up the chandelier. And then we just have all this patterns on the walls. These are actually in the real building, because this room here is actually inspired by the Royal Pavilion in Brighton, which is George IV's sort of summer palace, his holiday home, which he decorated inside in the chinoiserie style. So this room is almost a replica of the banqueting room in the Royal Pavilion, just on Minecraft scale, and I've also had to fit it in this palace to make it work. But it is right; it's very, very beautiful indeed. It's a really lovely space. So yes, that's the Queen's Banqueting Room. And then if we head on through, we've got the Queen's Saloon, which is like a sort of meeting room. This room is also in the Royal Pavilion in Brighton, but I just built it here because I wanted to include this in my project. Before I go on, guys, excuse me. Before I go on, guys, I just wanted to explain that with the Blue Palace, there's no limits. I've included all kinds of interiors from different palaces and different buildings, you know, because I've really been able to play with architecture in this project. So there's no right or wrong. I've really just been able to include things. There's really no rules with this build, you know, so I've really been able to play with architecture here. So this room, yes, is actually in the Royal Pavilion in Brighton, and it's known as the Saloon, but we got it in here. So this is known as the Queen's Saloon. It's in the Queen's apartments. So on the ceiling here, we have a blue ceiling with almost clouds on. I tried to make them look like clouds. I don't know if I did that justice or not. Again, we have these gigantic chandeliers hanging up. And then we have this unusual floor, which is supposed to be like a carpet pattern. And then we have the fireplace, which is built in a alcove just there. And the whole space is really just so big and so magnificent, and it's rather more simple compared to the rest of the rooms, but it's still very elegant, I think, and it's really pretty. So we'll move on through, and we'll take a look at the Queen's Chinese drawing room, or the Queen's Oriental drawing room. Again, this space is supposed to be in the chinoiserie style, which I tried to capture. We have marble floors now, and we have these 4 very unusual looking chandeliers with this beautiful vaulted ceiling with lots of different patterns and styles and all these complicated patterns of gold. On the walls, you'll notice there's lots of green and blue and red patterns on there, and really beautiful space. I've also built these sort of strange lantern things in the room to try and give it even more of an oriental theme. I don't know if I've captured that, but I do think they really add to the space. And this room really had no purpose. It was just sort of like a drawing room. And if you guys don't know what a drawing room is is not a room for drawing. It's a room called the withdrawing room. That's what, you know, so when you're at a grand dinner somewhere, you would withdraw afterwards into a drawing room. Before it was called the withdrawing room, and then in more sort of later years it was called the drawing room. So, and it's a place where it's like a living room, but it was called the drawing room in those days. Okay, so let's head on through, and you'll notice the doorways sort of line up in the middle there, going through. But now we're entering into what's known as an enfilade. So an enfilade is an alignment of doors that go in a straight line. So whenever you go to a historical property somewhere, if they have an alignment of doors like this, it's known as an enfilade. So let's head on through. Now this room is called the Queen's Bedchamber. Now this room is one of my favourite rooms in the apartment. It's purely ceremonial, so there's no function to this room. No one sleeps in here. It's just purely ceremonial. It's purely for just display purposes. So, but it is monumental in the scale. I built it big because I imagine if this palace was real, spaces in these apartments would have to be bigger to accommodate the court. So I built these rooms on a bigger scale for that reason. We have a crown on the floor here to represent that this room is of royal, is belonging to a member of the royal family. The room has 2 fireplaces, and then we have this beautiful ceiling which is inspired by Queen Marie Antoinette's. The whole room is inspired by Queen Marie Antoinette's bedchamber at the Palace of Versailles. And you can see here, I've really created a lovely sort of central vault there with these sort of corner bits and lovely detail on the mantelpiece there. And then we have this gigantic bed in the centre, which looks like a huge canopy with these strange feathers on the corner at the top. And you can see the bed hangings, and then you can also see that the bed is built on a raised platform. So it's not on the same level as this floor, it's raised up to make it sort of look like a stage, because again, these rooms are just purely ceremonial. They are just stage sets. So if we head on through to the back, through this unusual gate, if you guys don't know why they have these weird fences in royal palaces, why they have these strange beds in front of, why they have these strange railings in front of these beds, it's because in places like Versailles in France, they would need these railings in front of the beds because these rooms would have been open to the public at Versailles. So they would need these railings in order to hold back the courtiers who would be coming into the palace every day, the aristocracy. So they would need these railings to keep them back. It's like a sort of a velvet security rope, you know, like in a club, to sort of separate the public half of the room from the sort of private part of the room. So just a little fact there. So if we head on around the back, like I was saying, we're going to visit one of the rooms in the Queen's private apartments here. And it's known as the lobby area. Now the private apartments are where the Queen would actually live. You know, so these rooms were built behind the Queen's grand apartments because these would be where the Queen would actually live. The grand apartments were purely for show, and the private apartments are where, you know, she would actually live. So this is just one of the rooms in the Queen's apartments, known as the lobby area. So when you come into here, on the right you can see there's rooms, and on the left there's rooms as well. So you can see that it leads off into various different areas of the Queen's private apartments. So let's head on back through and we'll explore a bit more of the Blue Palace and the Queen's grand apartments. So we'll leave the bedchamber now and we'll head on through to the Queen's large chamber here. The large chamber acts as a sort of guard room and a waiting room. I didn't know what to do with this space to begin with. I didn't know what to do with it or how to decorate it. Now the rest of these rooms in the apartments are mostly inspired by the Palace of Versailles. You'll notice that the ceilings are a bit lower as well because above these rooms are apartments on the top floor, which will be home to the Queen's servants and to her children, if we're speaking as if they were rooms that were, you know, actually being used. So this is just a space that's inspired by the Palace of Versailles. I built this central bit here, which is rather beautiful, and then we have the chandeliers, and also in most of these rooms now we have the marble floors pattern, which so this room really acts as like a waiting room and a guard room, but it's right on the corner of the palace. So now we're going to head down these rooms, which are another extension of the Queen's grand apartments. These are enormous, you know. This is one of my most favourite rooms in the palace, purely because it's so feminine and beautiful and really playful. So in this room we haven't gone for the vaulted ceiling effect, we've gone for what looks like plasterwork. So this is what's known as the Queen's music room, and it's really beautiful, it's really feminine, it's got lighter colours. So what I did with this room, I started to build one of these swags on the ceiling, these hanging sort of things. I built one and then I just kept building them, and eventually I created this really lovely ceiling with and this is the Queen's music room, and we can see over here we have three musical objects. So to the left here we have the Queen's piano, which is just a simple piano with a candlestick on top, and then we have an organ here. It's supposed to look like an organ anyway, but it's an organ to me. And then over here we have a few sort of note boxes and things. So that's what, you know, so that, to me, that's what gives the room its purpose. But it's a really lovely space, and it's so different and unusual, but so pretty. And just so, I don't know, just really nice room. So then we'll move on into the Queen's dining chamber. Into the Queen's dining room. So you'll notice that the Queen has two dining rooms. She has a big banqueting room, which is for big occasions like state dinners and things, and then she has a smaller dining room, which is for what's known as the grand courtyard. So if we're talking as if these rooms are being used in real life, this room would be for sort of like an eating ceremony where the Queen would eat her meals in public. It's called the Grand Courtyard, and it was a practice that would happen at Versailles, where the king and the queen would sit and eat their meals in front of the court, almost like a performance. So this room is inspired by the Grand Courtyard. So it's a huge space, and you can see this room is especially grand with a beautiful ceiling. And then here we have a canopy, which is where the queen would sit under at this table here. She would sit in the centre there under this massive canopy and eat her meals before the court, who would gather around and watch her eat her meals. You can see here I've also done a beautiful one at the back on the floor. This room is also pretty much nearly almost exactly alike as the room of the Grand Courtyard in Queen Marie Antoinette's apartments at the Palace of Versailles. Well, it's inspired by it anyway, but it's a really pretty space. It's so huge as well, such a long room. I mean, I suppose you could use these rooms for multi-purposes. You could even use it as like a gathering room or like some kind of function room. But it's such a big space and it's really elegant and beautiful. So we'll head on through and we'll go into what's known as the Queen's audience chamber. So if she's the Queen, she's bound to have an audience chamber where she would sit and have council meetings, etc. This space is beautiful. Again, they all are. It's a really nice space. You can see there's a canopy there with a kind of seat underneath on a raised platform there, which would be where she would sit and address her audience. Yeah, this is a really nice space. It could also be used as a drawing room if you want to, or a gathering space, or a meeting space. You know, just somewhere. But it's just a wonderful room. So again, with these rooms, I don't always know what I want to do with them. I think each room is just so exquisite and beautiful. Really came together well. So we'll head on through again, and this is the last room in the Queen's grand apartments, and this is what's known as the Queen's guard room. So its purpose is a guard room, obviously, and yes, it was the very first room that I built in the Queen's apartments, and you can see here it's just a nice space. To me, this one's quite simplistic, but it is still very pretty and elegant, and it's a nice little entrance room into the Queen's apartments. Now, this is the last room actually in the Queen's apartments, because like I say, you enter the palace from the Queen's courtyard. So it's a really lovely room. Beautiful. And then we'll head on through to this space, which is known as the Hall of Giants, which is inspired by the Hall of Mirrors at the Palace of Versailles. And this took me 2 or 3 days to build. It's such a magnificent space. Really just so elegant and wonderful. Just so extraordinary, the details on the ceiling. And it's just a wonderful space. It really is. So that concludes our journey through the Queen's grand apartments at the Blue Palace. Don't forget to like, subscribe, tell me what you think, leave me a comment, and yeah, stay tuned. And I'll be back next time to show you guys even more of the splendid Blue Palace. Take care.